Something bad is beginning to unfold in economically developed nations.
The more that I think about this, the more I feel like we might be totally fucked.
Young men are abandoning colleges at a rapid rate.
An NYU professor says fewer men going to college will lead to a mating crisis, with the U.S. producing too many broke and alone men.
This is really not good for society. Like it or not, a four-year college degree is required for entry to the upper echelon of America.
Women with college degrees don't want to partner with men who don't have a college degree.
The mating inequality that's going to come out of this dearth of men in college poses an existential risk to our economy and our society.
As women continue to excel in education and the workplace alike, an ever-increasing number of the male population are withdrawing. In the last 10 years, the number of men between the ages of 18 and 30 reporting no sex in the last year has tripled. And the worrying thing is that this could so easily lead to a violent storm.
The most dangerous person in the world is a broke and a lone male, and we are producing too many of them.
The future for relationships between men and women is starting to look bleak.
If men don't kill themselves, they're exiting education and society and family life at the highest rates ever. Women are frantically pursuing careers only to discover that they're unable to find a partner that they're attracted to and then jump on meds at 40 years old. And then the people who want kids can't find a partner that does as well. Birth rates declining, faith in the leaders and the news organizations non-existent, and everyone's just about sufficiently sedated not to notice or care that it's going on.
That's a precise and accurate summary of how the West has declined and will collapse, yes.
Alright guys, what's going on, y'all? Nick here, coming to you with another video. So, as you can see on the screen, it says the maiden crisis. This video is actually from Beautiful. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, but I'm gonna leave the link in the description down below so you can check it out for yourselves. But this video is called The Maiden Crisis: Why the Dating Market is Doomed. Now, there's been many people who have speculated as to why the dating market is doomed. But what this video is going to actually go into is the education gap amongst men and women. You know, historically, men were the ones that had access to education. They were the ones working in the work field, right? The workforce. And over time, it seems like women are actually the predominant gender that's actually getting the degrees and entering the workforce. Now, why is that? You know, there's a bunch of feminist jargon. They will have you to believe that perhaps, you know, men are not smart enough or whatever the case, or they lazy. And that's why you probably hear terms like, you know, where are all the good men at, right? Or is there an actual agenda within colleges that actually ostracize men, that actually belittle men just for being masculine? Is there an agenda within society as a whole that tries to actually suppress masculinity, and now men as a whole are choosing to just simply opt out of going to college because they don't feel like they actually fit in? What's the actual root cause of it all? So please continue watching this video because I guarantee it's going to be very interesting. All right, check this out.
How did we arrive at this point? In the not-too-distant past, marriage preceded sex, and young women were sold by their families to eligible men of equal or superior social status. These young women had little say in the matter, and once they were married, they remained dependent on their husband's earnings until they died. The lives of both men and women were extremely tough. Most men suffered grueling days in the fields, earning very little money, and most women suffered grueling days in the home, earning no money.
Now, you know what's so crazy about this whole narrative? Notice how they try to present the women as these, you know, these species that's extremely oppressed by these men. You know, they had grueling days at the home. It's like, it's so crazy when the women that I interact with on a day-to-day basis, many of them actually would like to actually have that stay-at-home, you know, work life. They actually want to stay at home. Matter of fact, the reason why they are allowed, at least from the women I interview, it seems like the only reason why they are working is because there aren't any good men out there, right? But for the most part, this seems to be the general consensus that if there was a man that actually was on his shit, that actually was a man of means, right? What they call a high value man, if they actually could snag a man like that, then they would have no issue staying at home. But the problem is, if you have a bunch of, what these women would call bums or losers, scrubs, whatever you want to call it, right? Because they don't have these bachelor's degrees and higher forms of education, then you can't survive in this modern day and time with a single income, right? And that's why they choosing to go to work, which, by the way, that too is a lie. You can survive on a single income, but you just have to stop trying to cater to your lust. Stop trying to cater to your flesh. But that's a whole nother subject that many people don't like to, nobody wants to enter that topic, because then you actually have to die out to yourself. Oh, go figure.
Women tended to their children, but also to domestic duties, which back then were far more difficult and time-consuming. The technologies we take for granted today, like the vacuum cleaner, electric washing machine, dishwasher, and so on, had yet to come to humanity's aid. Even when the Industrial Revolution was in full swing, many households, especially those in rural areas, still didn't have running tap water. But everything changed in the 20th century. In the United States, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, ratified in the year of 1920, permitted women the right to vote, and a series of technological advancements followed, which began to turn the tide. Chief among these developments were the electric washing machine and the birth control pill.
The introduction of the pill caused a tremendous social shift. Unmarried women were able to have sex without getting pregnant, which is enormously significant because you didn't have to get married to have sex.
Now, do you see how crazy that is? Now, they touched on two things, the washing machine and the birth control pill. Now, let's actually talk about the washing machine, because I think that's actually a very important thing that many people are not thinking about that might fly over your head. I remember I was taking an economic class, right? And they literally said, what was one of the greatest inventions? Now, obviously, within the context of this conversation, we know that would be the electric washing machine. Now, why is that important, though? The reason why is because many women back in the day, some of you may not even realize this, especially in third world countries, they deal with this till this day. They would have to walk hours away from home just to find a water source, a river, a stream, whatever the case may be. And they would have to wash their clothes that way. And then washing their clothes obviously took time because they're doing it by hand. And then they would have to walk hours just to get back home. As you can see, that literally is an all-day endeavor. Right? So now what's happening is that the washing machine comes on the scene, and now literally you just put it inside. You guys know how it works. Put the clothes inside, press a button, and you can walk away. Not only is it a multitasking, gift, you get what I'm saying? But now it frees up your time. There's so much benefits from the washing machine. But you can actually see now that these menial tasks, quote unquote, right? These household tasks, if you could just press a button, now these women are liberated. Now, this actually goes into the birth control pills because, again, there's this idea of this liberation. And as we're going throughout this video, what I really want to propose to you all is that with this supposed liberation, did that actually doom the dating market, or is that the cause of this mating crisis, this liberation that these women have? Because now, again, notice what this woman said. Because of the birth control pill, these women, in other words, they can partake in lewd sexual activity and don't have to worry about actually being saddled up with a man, because if they got pregnant, then obviously they would need a man because they knew the importance of a man in raising that child. But now, because of the birth control pill, have all the senseless, sex that you want, and I could just pop this pill and I don't have to worry about it. I mean, truly, you can see how satanic that is. But regardless of that, you can see that, again, there's this idea of this liberation that women are afforded with technology, and as a result, that's what actually caused them to say, I could do the same thing as a man. Right? I could do the same thing as a man, and they don't even realize as a result. I want to think about that, right? With this liberation and with this idea of being just like a man, here they are racking up this body count, and they don't even realize they're actually devaluing themselves. Now, when they reach a high value man, they don't realize that, he might actually, smash. Oh, yeah, he may clap the cheeks. For sure, he may clap the cheeks. But what you really got to ask yourself is that, does that man actually take you seriously? Is that man actually going to marry you? And then what ends up happening, you see, because men will literally, they will screw anything. Even high value men, they will screw anything. Now, why is that important? Because if you have a woman, and let's, I hate to do this, but let's just talk about numbers, right? Let's say this woman in the Fibonacci scale, you know what I'm saying? In other words, are they face symmetrical? And if it is, usually symmetrical faces mean that they usually pretty, right? So on the Fibonacci scale, let's suppose that this woman is probably a 3, right? She's not pretty at all. But a high value man, he's looking at it like, hey, I wouldn't mind. She's throwing herself at me. I might as well, right? So he ends up smashing that. Now, in the mind of that woman that's a 3, she actually thinks that she can actually snag high value man. And that's where she's confused, because she don't even realize that men by nature, they will literally screw anything. But again, the question is, will that man actually marry you? The answer is emphatic no. Such a man will not marry you. He will not marry you. And that's why all these women are chasing such a small proportion of men, only 20% of the men. And the men are just like, man, I ain't trying to put up with these whack, trash-ass girls.
Or you didn't have to risk an abortion.
Control over the reproductive process in particular meant that women were free to pursue educational and economic success for the first time in history.
Son of a bitch! We struck the mother load!
Marriage became a matter of choice as opposed to a social or economic necessity. By 1970, 50% of single women and 40% of married women were participating in the labor force, and 1981 was the last year that more men than women graduated from a 4-year undergraduate program. Now, 60 years after the release of the birth control pill, young women are steaming ahead. In the UK, women in their 20s earn, on average, $1,100 more per annum than their male counterparts, and they're doing way better than men on the educational front.
What's happened is that males have fallen rapidly behind females at every stage of the education system, and in every advanced economy in the world, on pretty much every measure you can look at, girls are ahead of boys, and that's increasingly true even in subjects like math and science. Nobody predicted that once girls and women caught up with boys and men, that they would keep going, and that we would now have a bigger gender gap in higher education than we did 50 years ago, just the other way around.
After centuries.
You know what's very disingenuous about these statistics, though? And it's true, but disingenuous, why this is disingenuous is because, I was a teacher back in New York, right? And one thing that they really fail to point out is that the manner in which they go about educating these boys and girls is very, it caters to the girls. What do I mean by that? Boys, especially when they're younger, they are very active. They want to move around. And this is why, in my personal belief, I think they falsely diagnose many of the boys with ADHD is because they have to move around. They feel like they got to do something. This is why back in the day when they had trades in the schools, you could see a lot of boys, they were succeeding in that avenue because they got to use their hands. They actually got to do something physical. But now when you have these boys, they got to sit for hours. And I've seen it in the classroom. Yeah, there are gifted teachers out there who can keep a class engaged by funny antics, being very charismatic. But that only goes so far. I've seen many boys, literally, they just phase out because it can't grab them. And where do they excel? Well, of course, they excel in gym, right? They excel in all the things that caters to actually using their hands. And this is why you can see it all the time. Women may dominate the labor force when it comes to certain jobs, but when it comes to trades, like electrical work, plumbing, mechanics, for the most part, men are still dominating those jobs, and those jobs are very much needed. I mean, if you have a car, don't you need a mechanic? Especially if you don't know how to fix your own car? Thank you very much. So these are the kind of things that's very disingenuous because, again, it's not really an issue of whether or not women are smarter than men, because that's not the case. And I'll go vice versa. I don't think men are smarter than women. I don't think that's the case. However, are you catering to the style that it's most conducive to that student learning? You see, that's the hallmark sign of a good teacher. You got to know your student and their learning styles.
Of men dominating the economy, most of the job growth is in industries where women traditionally work. and those jobs require more education. The latest piece of data is that women are dominating college enrollment. In a few years, 2 women will earn a degree for every 1 man. In fairness, many young men are dodging college with good reason.
The typical graduate of a 4-year university is going to walk into their first job with $26,000 in debt. And all too often, that college degree, which was supposed to promise a stable middle-class life, is falling far short of expectations. About a third of the nation's colleges leave students high and dry, earning less after obtaining their degree than the typical high school graduate 10 years after graduation. Somewhere around 40% of college grads are underemployed. That means they're working in jobs that do not actually require a 4-year degree.
But
wow, think about that, right? You as a man, think about that. And women, if you're listening, watching this, I hope you actually understand the mindset of a man, right? If they know these statistics, right, which a lot of these men do, they believe me, especially what this new generation, what are they, Gen Z or whatever? Believe me, they know all the statistics. They know that they're going to go to this 4-year college and they're going to come out with this crazy amount of debt, and they're looking at it and they weighing the cost, and they saying, is this really worth it for me to be in some dead-end job if I could just go straight to a trade and I only have to spend 1 year and I don't come out with crazy amount of debt, and I'll be able, you see, this is what's so crazy, many people be sleeping on these trades. Do y'all know how much electricians make? Do y'all know, like, when they actually get to that point where they actually can have their own contracts and they have their own business, do you know how much these trades make? But again, you see, these women, they, what is it? It's all they care about is what I've heard this term recently. They care about the number 666, which if anybody knows their Bible, we all know that's satanic. But what does that stand for? They want men who are 6 feet tall. Apparently, they're, you know what, got to be 6 inches, and they got to be making 6 figures. And even at that, apparently, actually, women today want 6 figures is not even enough. So go figure, right? But why am I even stating this? I'm stating this because, again, it goes to show you a lot of these men, if they know they're going to come out with debt, they find an alternative way. This is why you see a bunch of men going in a different route outside of just schooling.
Fact remains that adults with a bachelor's degree earn an average of $2.8 million during their careers, 1.2 million more than the median for workers with a high school diploma.
Think about how many jobs that have nothing to do with college still require a degree. And from there, that's just the entry point. Media, economics, politics, law, business, almost all professional jobs today require a college degree. It's simply a bare minimum to even get a shot at competing.
Ultimately, it all depends on the individual college and student, respectively. A declining male presence in higher education suggests that men are on the road to becoming less competitive in the economic sphere than before. And that's bad news for the dating market. Why? Because women are hypergamous, which means that they're biologically wired to select sexual partners who are as competent or more competent than they are. Hypergamy is a good thing, for if our female ancestors had been inclined to have sex with and reproduce with men who are unable to defend or acquire resources for them, our species probably would have died out a very long time ago. But see, the thing is, when women become the higher achieving sex in the social order, hypergamy prevents many men and women from finding suitable mates. Because a large pool of women find attraction in only a very small pool of highly promising or successful men.
I just want to know why it is so hard to find a guy that I'm attracted to that isn't an asshole.
Where did all the good men go?
Can someone tell me where I can find a decent, loyal, funny, good-looking guy around here?
This reality is playing out on modern dating apps like Tinder. Data reveals that men swipe right on about 60% of female profiles, whereas women swipe right on only 4% of male.
Woo! Men swipe, what is it? He said right, meaning that they actually want to date these women. They swipe right 60%, and women, I was thinking like 20. They said 4%. Oh my gosh. Do you guys see why this is dismal? So in other words, these women out here, they're chasing only 4% of the men. And with these guys in the 4%, right? Think about that. For these guys who have all this extreme access to cheeks, what do they somehow believe that? Think about that now. Think about that. All these women think they actually have a legitimate chance with this 4% of men. And this is another thing too, right? You see, this is why I keep talking about polygyny, right? So you see, and I'm gonna keep it a buck, right? I know for a fact a lot of these women, they might say it, they might say that they don't like polygyny, but deep down inside, they will absolutely accept it for it with the right conditions. If that man, I mean, look at what was that dude? I think it's Hugh Hefner, the guy for Playboy. They all knew this crusty old dude had all of them, and they didn't care. Why? Because he had this money. And a bunch of politicians are the same damn way. They'll write it in legislation that it's only one man, one woman, but they all practicing it behind the scenes. They're all dirty. They're all running dirty. And when I say that, truth be told, from a biblical standpoint, I mean, why don't you just do it the right way? If you're willing to take care of them, then yeah, sure, you can have multiple wives. But this is why all this is a farce, because, again, these women, matter of fact, how many of you know the story of that one girl? She's not even interested in that dude until she finds out that other women are interested in him. You see, that's that hypergamy working again. You see, when she realized that, oh, okay, so he's actually a prospect who a lot of people actually favor. A lot of people are attracted to him. Oh, okay, so yeah, let me actually date up. Let me actually, go out chase this guy because he has that status. That's all it is. That's all it is. This is the same thing. This is why a bunch of these celebrities, that's why all these girls, they all have the poster of that same celebrity on their wall. It's all that's literally polygyny all over the place. But the point being is that a lot of these girls are chasing the same dudes. And when they can't get them, then they bypass all these great dudes, by the way. They may not have, 6 figures. They might be but hard, honest, working men. And what they say are they ain't no good men. Well, with odds like this, you bypassing 96% of men out there. Yeah, I'm sure. The only good men are only 4%. Those are the only good men.
Profiles. On account of being scarcely available, these few desirable men are free to set the rules of the dating game. And as the renowned evolutionary psychologist David Buss said in 2015, research overwhelmingly shows that men harbor, on average, a greater desire for sexual partner variety.
So what you see, where there is a surplus of women and a scarcity of men, is more casual dating, because the men get to make the rules. If there are fewer men than there are women, the women have to compete, and the only way that they can compete is by playing the game that the men want.
This sexual paradigm has long been referred to as hookup culture, and it often sees attractive women moving from one short-term relationship to another.
Yeah, but we could add all the not so attractive women in there as well. They participate in hookup culture just the same.
Unable to tie down the men they desire to committed, long-term, monogamous relationships.
I don't know how I always end up in the exact same situation. It's always great. And I feel like these people I meet, I'm like, wow, like I'm finally clicking with somebody. And then it's always the same thing. They're not in a place where they are looking for a relationship. They have other things that are more important. And I'm just like I'm never good enough. Every single...
Did you hear that? I'm never good. Do you think she's serious? Do y'all think this girl is genuine? This is why I was playing that, the proverbial violin, because that girl is a joke. I'm never good enough. You know what she's looking for? She's looking for people to cater to her and say, oh, no, you are good enough. No, the reality is you're not good enough. You're not. That's why they're not wifing you up. You're not good enough. You see, rather than you trying to blame a bunch of men, there aren't no good men around, or what's wrong with that. No, you're not good enough. You see, and this is what I was saying before. You have a bunch of people. I'm not saying that she in particular is a 3, but if you have a lot of girls who are only chasing 4% of the men, these 4%, let's just suppose on the Fibonacci scale, right? And just in terms of appearance, attractiveness alone, let's say they're 10s. You have all the you have a bunch of girls who are all chasing 4% of those men. And you think in all the percentage of girls out there, you think they all 10s themselves? Absolutely not. There's a bunch of 3s, a bunch of 4s, 5s, you name it. And they all, because they had sex, just because they opened up their legs to that man. they assume that that man actually likes them. No, he just regarded you as a booty call. And now when you have people like me who are telling women to actually preserve themselves for marriage, to actually preserve themselves in their temple, because their temple belongs to the Most High. If I say that, that would be considered misogynistic, right? That's misogynistic, right? Because that goes against what the beginning of this video pointed out, the liberty that was afforded to you because of modern day conveniences, because of technology. The birth control pill, you're able to have all these liberties. And so if I try to strip away the liberty, you think that I'm actually trying to oppress you. But no. I mean, look, you could be free as much as you want. You could do whatever the hell you want. But within that freedom, just understand, if you actually devalue yourself, then you don't have the right to start crying and trying to look for sympathy. Like, am I not good enough? Am I not? You're not. You're not good enough. Work on yourself. Work on yourself so that you, a guy of means and value, would actually find you attractive. And let's keep that a buck. I'm telling you guys this right now. And when I say guys, I mean the women. Women, these men, the high value men, will not find you attractive if you have a high body count. It may sound harsh, it may sound mean, but that's the reality. They will not find you attractive.
Boy, I go on a date with. Yeah, I want a relationship. Oh, I'm just looking for the right person. I'm so loyal, I just want a relationship. We have a really good date and then I just don't hear from them again. Or I do for a couple of days and then they ghost. I've seriously fucking had enough. I'm gonna be single for the rest of my life.
There was a time when if men wanted to have sex, they had to marry you. Whereas now, the price of sex is Netflix and chill. So the standards have changed, and we've allowed them to change because we wanted to prove that we could do it just as bad as the boys. And I think that is backfiring.
The result is a quite distorted sexual marketplace.
If you have more lax rules around casual sex before marriage and birth control, which means that you can have sex without fear of having children, that means that women can have sex with high-value men who are perhaps higher value than they would usually have access to, which then skews their goals moving forward about who they want to be in a long-term relationship with.
Because when they were sleeping with these really attractive guys, they thought, okay, this person is attracted to me because I'm on his level, not knowing that men drastically reduce their standards when it comes to casual situations.
And if you do have this experience with this guy and it was a fantastic experience and you're head over heels for him, you want to replicate that experience in the next sort of relationships you have. But if that guy that you're dating doesn't quite reach that standard, you're never going to be happy.
You see, that's what we call imprint, right? There are men out there, men that these girls regarded as like the alphas, right? But they were just straight up pookies. A lot of these pookies just imprinted on them. You see, again, that's the issue with having this high body count, because just like that man eloquently said, if that dude, who that girl in her eyes viewed him as the alpha, anybody that doesn't meet that same standard, she's never going to be satisfied. And what's going to happen? She's going to self-sabotage that new relationship, and she's going to bounce from the next relationship to the next relationship to the next relationship, trying to seek that same dopamine hit. She's chasing that same dopamine hit from that first dude. And this is literally a drug. Drug addicts, they deal with the same thing. They chasing that first dopamine hit, and they never going to get it. Your senses are never going to be that greatly satisfied as that first hit. It's never going to be satisfied. This is why, women, you need to preserve yourself. You got to.
Men, on the other hand, are struggling not only to find long-term partners, but even to have sex at all. Sadly, many have become too apathetic and devoid of confidence to even bother trying.
I feel like possibly my self-esteem is so low that I've subconsciously ruled out the possibility of ever getting a girlfriend or whatever.
Generally speaking, the only people who are significantly benefiting from this state of affairs are the limited number of high-status men.
That top slice of playboys, they're having simultaneous relationships all back to back. It's great for them in the short term. It's rubbish for the other men, and it's also rubbish for the women, because you end up with women who actually really want to have loving, intimate, monogamous relationships, and they don't feel like they can.
If other groups are in fact gaining from this condition, it's primarily those in the middle and upper classes.
Studies have suggested that hookup culture is in fact predominantly a middle class phenomenon. And the further you are up the socioeconomic scale, the more likely you are to be able to enjoy and, get something out of the dissolution of sexual norms. But the further down the socioeconomic scale you go, the more likely that is to result in chaotic lives, eking out an existence with 4 kids by 4 dads and a fly-by-night partner who beats up your children when you're not looking. It's not obvious to me that that's somehow intrinsically better than a slightly meh marriage to somebody you stop fancying after 10 years.
As things stand, loneliness and frustration reign in an increasingly atomized world. Our society is cultivating a densely populated underclass of men who are destined to remain penniless and alone their entire lives.
And those are the guys who cause problems because they're faced with possibly being zeros in the evolutionary race. And so they are willing to take big risks in order to catapult themselves up the status hierarchy and have a chance to get into the marriage and mating market.
And beyond the threat of violence is the problem.
That's crazy because, is it possible? Yeah, I'm sure sexual frustration because of the lack of access to sex can cause men to, take drastic measures. I think they went to the extreme. I don't know if these guys are necessarily going to resort to trying to hold people at gunpoint. I don't know if they're going to go that far. But I could see why that loneliness will cause men to, perhaps do things that are, maybe hazardous to others, perhaps. But I think that's a stretch. I do believe that's a stretch. What I do believe, on the other hand, though, is that these men are not whining, actually. They're not actually... You had that one guy they showed where, I think I might be single for the rest of my life. He's just a loser. He's just an incel. But majority of the men in general, they look for solutions. And unfortunately, I don't agree with some of them, but this is why you have these movements like the Red Pill, you have movements like MGTOW, you have movements like Passport Brothers that's growing at an alarming rate because these men are just like, look, majority of these issues that we're dealing with, which, let's keep it a buck, it's feminism. These issues we're dealing with, it's in the West. So let's go get ourselves a traditional woman in the East and we'll be content. And that's what you find men doing. That's literally what you find men doing. But I don't think they necessarily go into the extreme. I think that's like fear-mongering that this video is trying to employ.
Of population collapse.
Probably the biggest myth that exists right now is this overpopulation myth, when in fact we have a population collapse problem. Like, people have no idea how fast the population is going to collapse.
If fewer people are reproducing, next generation you have fewer people to reproduce as fewer people are reproducing, and it...
The lifespan is increasing. That's the only reason why the population of Earth isn't plummeting, but it will plummet. The growth rate in the US has been below replacement rate since like 71 or 72. Japan actually went down by 600,000 people last year.
So you're saying people need to be having more kids?
Yeah. I'm sure you know a lot of people who have like no kids. Like, how many kids do you guys have? I got no kids.
That we know of.
None of you guys have what the fuck?
At the present rate, there'll be a striking absence of the young people necessary to uphold our society in 50 years' time. And so, if the mating crisis in our society isn't fixed, it may be a very dark road ahead.
Wow. Hey, you guys, I don't know about you, but this was very entertaining and very educational. Let me actually land the plane by saying this. Because again, I don't want to leave you guys off without a solution. Here's the solution. Women, you gotta actually value yourselves a lot more and stop operating like whores. Period, point blank. Again, it may sound harsh, but that's the reality. This so-called liberation, which is pretty much just selling your bodies for cheap, is you have been got by that lie that society is trying to feed you. As for the men, stop being so damn simpish. You guys really, again, a lot of men are waking up. They're realizing, hey, if these women, Western women, modern women, whatever you want to call it, these feminazis, if these women are not going to actually be feminine, they're not going to be, agreeable, you can't work with them, then they're going to simply opt out. And men, what you need to do is you need to seek yourself that Proverbs 31 type woman, that woman that fears the Most High, When you find such a woman, that woman, and all women, they all have, you know, their little kinks that they need to work out. All women do. The same way like all men have their flaws, right? None of us are 100% there. We haven't arrived. However, when you find yourself that traditional woman, that Proverbs 31 woman, that woman that actually puts the Most High first, and because she has that moral compass, which is the Bible, because she has that moral guide, that woman will try to build your house properly. Because again, it's just like the word. It says that a wise woman builds her house, but a foolish woman plucks it down with her hands. Think about that. So do you want your house? And what is the house? Your name, your status, the life you built for yourself. You as a young man, right? If you've been working all these years trying to amass all this wealth and you finally obtained it, right? You building your house. A woman by your side is only a good woman, right? A wise woman is only going to build it up the more so. But when you have a foolish woman, right? She could literally pluck it down with her hand with all that nagging, with all the complaints. You get what I'm saying? She's going to tear your house apart. Anyway, you guys, again, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, comment down below, do all that YouTube stuff. And with that being said, Nick over and out. The message sent. Jesus is King, y'all.